Throughout history, there have been countless unexplainable stories, events, and moments captured on audio. These horrifying tapes were archived, never to be heard again. Until now. These are the tapes of trepidation. Tape number 20. Hell is but a great machine. Darkness. The only sight visible as my eyes opened and were met with the sheer black that now surrounded me. The skin on my forearms burned with a numbing cold pain and was unnaturally hot and clammy to the touch. I coughed with an ache in my chest at the harsh breath that filled my lungs. A grim and painful silence was all I heard. The taste on the tip of my tongue and lips was of copper and ash, my nostrils filled with a burning sensation, followed by a smell of sweet rot. A pulsating feeling overtook my senses as my ears picked up a droning sound in the distance. I found myself to be stuck, unable to move forward toward the sound. It could have only been for a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Slowly, I put one foot down, followed by the other, and walked a distance that I will never be able to comprehend. Sweat fell into my eyes, followed by a burning sting. I tried to blink away the pain, but was rewarded with an equally uncomfortable dryness. I could feel my pupils dilate as the light overtook me, sending a harsh, pulsing pain to the back of my head. The pain was blinding, and yet I still felt a great sense of relief overtake me as I could see again, even if I was still in horrible pain with the worst migraine I have ever had. The relief was short-lived as I looked upon my surroundings. I saw nothing that seemed even a little bit familiar. Gray stone walls covered in moisture that seemed to ooze out of the wall. The floor was covered in ash that stuck to my feet and stirred up as I walked. Blood-covered areas of the wall caught my attention, and I was focused on them and recognized handprints. I shivered in fear as I walked on. I followed the walls, passing pools of blood on the floor. The horrid smell of copper overwhelmed me as I began to walk at a brisk pace, my breath quickening. That wasn't until I nearly ran into a great wooden door. The wood that made up this door was dark and smelled of rotting oak. and was bound together with rust-covered iron. A cloud of dust hung in the air and seemed to surround the door as if it was shrouded in mist. After taking in the sight of this massive door, I took several steps towards it. A piercing scream caused my ears to ring out and my whole body began to shake as I fell to the floor. An immeasurable pain overtook me as if to torture me with this noise. The sound was that of several people screaming directly into my ear and echoed within my brain, building pressure within my skull until my eyes began to water. I cried out in pain with a scream of my own to try and release some of the pressure before my skull cracked. As quickly as it came, the scream dissipated, although the ringing in my head remained. I wiped tears from my eyes as I steadied my breath as I slowly rose to my feet. After regaining what little composure I had, I made my way towards the great wooden door yet again. As I approached the door, I heard a sound. A sound that will now forever haunt my dreams. An immense and dreadful grinding. I paused with trepidation as I reached for the handle. How did I get here? What will I find here? Why was I sent here? And most importantly, where the hell was I? I took a deep breath as I prepared myself for anything. I was, however, severely unprepared for what I was about to see. As I slowly pulled open the door with an intense creak, I took a step back as my eyes beheld a seemingly infinite chamber covered in gore that was dripping down the sides of it. This chamber seemed to go on up forever into an untold darkness that seemed to swallow it whole. For a moment, I found myself to be lost in the darkness, as if it was pulling me towards it. I was able to break my fixation as I focused my attention on what was at the center of this horrid chamber. At the center of this hellish chamber was an immense machine of agony. It was made from gears, pulleys, and belts, held together by rusty, blood-stained iron straps. It was running at a speed that seemed both archaically slow and impossibly fast. I could feel the rumbling of this horrific machine deep inside my chest. My eyes watered in fear as I looked the machine up and down, taking in its crude build. I could smell a putrid stench that I was unable to identify. As my eyes focused back on the area in front of me, I was met with the crippling gaze of a horrible creature. This beast in front of me was gaunt, and its skin was a shade of lifeless gray. It turned its head towards me and its mouth formed into a smile. The smile, however, was not warm or inviting. It held horror behind it, unlike anything I had ever experienced. And it held a deep lust in its eyes. Sound of screaming broke me free from its gaze, and I looked to see several similar creatures who were dragging a man behind them. This man screamed and he begged as the ones carrying him turned to me. Stretched across their faces were smiles that held untold horrors behind them. And in their eyes, I saw an all-consuming greed. The creatures dragged the man up to the lower part of the machine. Smoke spewed from the insides as the gears turned faster. The creatures all turned and looked back at me as they began to feed the once screaming man into the gears. The man did not beg, and he no longer pleaded. He only began to maniacally laugh as his whole body slowly was pulled into the shredding gears. His insides spilled out, and his blood sprayed my face as the gears went to work, crushing his body. Skin, bone, and muscle all tore and ground as if being devoured by a starving animal, until only a part of his face and the single eye remained trapped within the gears of the machine. What took place next is why I have recorded this account, for it's a horrible memory I cannot bear to keep within anymore. The man who was now menaced by the gears of the great machine turned his eye and looked at me. He blinked only once and then narrowed his eye as what remained of his mouth formed into a wicked smile that has burned itself to my very soul. I jarred myself awake and quickly grabbed the trash can just beside my bed. I was sick for a few minutes, as what I had seen would cause me to be ill for days. I sprung out of bed, ran to my washroom, and threw cold water on my face in an attempt to calm myself and rinse away the bile on my lips and the sweat from my face. The nightmare, or what I was sure must have been one, was over. I took several deep breaths and found my lungs were no longer painful or heavy. My skin was not hot, and I no longer smelled sweet rot. However, I could still hear the droning and the grinding of that horrible, immense machine. And when I opened my eyes, I began to whimper as I felt a tear roll down my cheek. For the reflection of that ungodly smile was looking back at me. Oh, God. is but a great machine. Believe me, I've seen it. Ever turning, forever tormenting the souls of those whose life actions curse them with an eternity in this place. A machine manned by the most horrific creatures whose only lust in life is to cause untold suffering to the ones enslaved by the faceless monstrosity of this ghastly machine. This has been tape number 20, Hell is But a Great Machine, by the Tapes of Trepidation Horror Narration Podcast. Hell is But a Great Machine was written by TJ Hodder and was originally posted on the Dread Files, No Sleep, and Scary Stories subreddits. Music for this episode was created by Mason Desroches for Tapes of Trepidation. Narration, production, and sound design for this episode was by TJ Hodder. The Tapes of Trepidation theme was written by the incredible J.M. Scherf. All logos, banners, overlays, and graphic design work was provided by the very, very talented Jason Reese from Jaybird Digital Arts. Thanks for all your support with this project, Jay. Love you, buddy. If you have a story you would like to submit, or a question regarding the show, please contact us at tapesoftrepidation.podcast@gmail.com. Support the show by subscribing and leaving a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, or your favorite podcatcher. Or you can also leave us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Be sure to tell your friends. Word of mouth is extremely helpful for a new podcast like this one. Check us out on social media through the link tree in the show notes. We have Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. And if you'd like to support the show a little more, consider joining the Tapes of Trepidation Patreon, where for as little as $5 a month, you can gain access to monthly bonus short story narrations, the weekly behind-the-scenes podcast within the archive, and more. Come, join us, and become trapped within the archive. Just like my current patrons, Kelly Sisson, Neil Skarupa of Neurotic Voice, Doozer Pendon, Ronan Kamori, Eric Foams, and Patrick Stewart. Thank you all so much for the support. I can't thank you guys enough. All content used on Tapes of Trepidation is either original, used with permission, or is available on your Creative Commons Share-alike license. All rights reserved, unless otherwise stated. This podcast and its content may not be redistributed or rebroadcasted without the express written consent of Tapes of Trepidation and the story's author. Thank you so much for listening.